Hello, I'm Dr. Kit Slies. I'm a psychologist and a life coach, and I'm here to inspire your self-compassion, your confidence, and your growth. And today I'm talking about overthinking and some strategies for how to stop it, to stop overthinking, to change that pattern in yourself. So we'll talk a little bit about where the overthinking comes from because that's important to understand when we're understanding the value of the strategies for dealing with it. And before I get into those specifics, I just want to talk a little bit about where overthinking can come from and the overthinking that I'm talking about specifically with these strategies. The overthinking can come from lots of different places. People with anxiety can engage in overthinking, ADHD. It can come from patterns learned in childhood. It can really come from a variety of different places. And the overthinking that I'm talking about specifically can be a mix of some anxiety and worry, but really it comes from overdoing, the overthinking that comes from overdoing. Now, you might have learned in childhood that this is the way that you're supposed to be, but the crux of your overthinking today is really because your external world is so busy, and so your mind as a result is very busy as well. Often what's happening in our external world is a mirror or reflection of what's happening internally, or vice versa. So that's the overthinking that I'm talking about. And what that really looks like is when you just feel like you are just constantly thinking of the next thing. It might take the form of worrying, but it doesn't always have to feel like worrying. It just feels like you almost like can't stop planning or thinking of the next thing, thinking of all the things that are on your to-do list, all the things that you need to be doing. I put that in quotes because you don't need to be doing anything, right? So that's where the overthinking comes from. So, one of the solutions to that often is to do less in your external world, but sometimes we have a hard time doing that. We have a hard time letting go. And if we can find a way to deal with the overthinking internally, a lot of times that will spread out into our external world and we'll find less busyness there as well. But so why does this become problematic for folks? Because it doesn't just happen overnight. It doesn't happen naturally. It takes time, and it is a pattern that can build on itself and become self-reinforcing in a way. And so there are some reasons for that. One of them has to do with how the way that thoughts are created in the brain and the patterns that happen there. We have this phrase in psychology, in the world of studying the brain of neuroscience, that neurons that fire together wire together. Because when we have a thought, or when we do anything really, what's happening in the brain is that you have a series of neurons that are, we call firing. Basically, there is an electrical impulse that passes from one neuron that then is released to the next neuron that then fires that one, and then so on and so forth. And when you have a series of those that connect and um, create that pathway but through their connection, the more times that that pathway is fired, the more likely that pathway is to be fired again. This is one of the ways that we create habits and things like that. And so habits can serve us, but they can also be difficult or problematic as well. And so when we're thinking about strategies for changing the habit of overthinking, we need to basically find a way to make our brain not go down that pathway and go down a different pathway. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing that's often happening when we are engaging in overthinking is that we're having a physiological and an emotional response to those thoughts themselves. That physiological response is typically some level of a stress response, because we're thinking, the overthinking is usually like all the things that I need to be doing, or all the things that are on my plate, or just all the things, right? And that's even as I'm saying it, it creates a sense of urgency. That's our stress response. And there are varying levels of a stress response that we can have. Stress is not all bad. We need some level of stress to feel motivated. But when we're engaging in overthinking just constantly all the time, that raises our stress response. Long-term chronic levels of elevated stress are not a healthy thing. And so when we're combating the actual habit and behavior of overthinking, we need to also be addressing the stress response. And so I'll get into how to do that. And then the other thing that can be happening is an emotional response. We might be feeling fearful. We might be feeling angry at all the things we have to do, or angry at ourselves for not doing them. We might be feeling sad, despondent. Okay, we're having an emotional response to the thought itself. And so we need to address that emotional response as well. We also want to address the root cause. And what do I mean by this? When we think about why we engage in overthinking and why that becomes a pattern or a habit in the first place, it's important to remember that it serves some function for us. For those of us who engage in a lot of overthinking, we're often a high or an overachiever, we're doing a lot. We've we tend to find some degree of success in our lives for doing that. So it becomes a sort of reinforcing thing. If I overthink, I'll be successful. But meanwhile, you'll also be stressed out and plagued with this experience of overthinking, right? And so the root cause, what I mean by why it's important to remember that this is a protective response, is because we're not saying you have to eliminate this habit of planning and being thoughtful, but we do have to pay attention to how, when we have a protective habit, sometimes our brains can take that to an extreme. And so our minds will say, oh, okay, this is a good thing when we overthink. And it will actually cause us to engage in some unhelpful thought patterns. So we might engage in all or nothing thinking, thinking, oh my gosh, I have to get everything done or else nothing will get done. We might catastrophize, making those mountains out of a molehill, feeling like all the things on my to-do list are, every one of them's on fire and they're all things I've got to put out right now. And the reality is that those things are not true. So we have to challenge those thoughts, but remember that this comes from a protective place, which means that we're being compassionate with ourselves. So let me go through those areas of those. So I've mentioned 4 areas: the pathways in the brain that get created and strengthened as a pattern or a habit of overthinking. We have our physiological response, which is really a stress response in our body. We have an emotional response, and we have the root cause of the overthinking itself. So how do we use some strategies to address all of that? Well, the first thing is to have the self-awareness of the overthinking itself. If we can name out loud the things that are causing our sort of hamster wheel to spin on our brain, name them, write them down, say them out loud, that can be enough to shake up the pathway that we're going down, because that the neurons that are firing together and wiring together, that can become a somewhat subconscious process. In other words, a process that we're not even aware that we're doing it. So we have to bring awareness to that process in order to choose a different pathway. So that's step 1 that addresses the pathway. The second step is addressing that physiological stress response. So when you're noticing that you're overthinking, and you've noticed it because you've now named it out loud, you've written it down, you've just brought some awareness to it. Now what I want you to do is take a couple of nice, big, deep belly breaths. breaths that go all the way into your belly so that you feel your belly expand. Relax your shoulders down, relax your jaw, and make that out breath, that exhale, nice and long and slow. And just do that 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 times. That is going to change your stress response and get what's called your parasympathetic nervous system on board, which is the system that helps de-escalate our stress response. Okay. And then once you've done that, I want you to go ahead and name your emotion or a body sensation that you're noticing in yourself at that moment. And I want you to use the phrase, I'm noticing that I'm feeling. So I'm noticing that I'm feeling anxious. I'm noticing that I'm feeling fearful. I'm noticing some tension in my stomach. And what we know from research on, this is a mindfulness technique, what we know from the research on mindfulness is just noticing that in and of itself is often enough to de-intensify that experience and just help us be more present. Okay. And then the last step that you're going to do is remind yourself, this addresses the root cause. Okay. You're going to remind yourself that your overthinking is a protective response that you have. It's there because in some level it helps you succeed. And you're just going to reevaluate the thoughts that you're having. Or are these thoughts actually helpful to me? That's what I want you to ask yourself. Is the thought that I'm having that's creating this pathway and the physiological response and the emotional response, is the thought itself helpful? Or could I insert a more helpful thought that might still help me get the things done that I want to get done, but do it in a way that feels easier and is kinder to myself? Okay. So this is a strategy for combating overthinking that all of my high achievers, overachievers out there, folks with anxiety that just still get a lot of stuff done, can use. And if you practice it, it can actually help you change the pattern of overthinking. You might not get perfection with it, but it can create a lot of relief, still help you feel like you can be productive out in the world, but without the stress and anxiety that might be coming along with that for you. So I hope you found this helpful today, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.